Hello, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. The subject today is this Nissan Leaf. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. If you like this type of video, then please consider subscribing so you get to hear about more videos like this that are put out. So this is a 2015 Nissan Leaf. It's got about 20,000 miles. It's got squeaky brakes at the back. Except today it's made a liar out of me, because when I went to video the squeak, it ain't making any squeak at all. But trust me, for longer than I care to admit, it's had squeaky rear brakes. So it only does this squeak when reversing, and it's when you're reversing after the car's been left for a little while. So you take the handbrake off, put it in reverse, start reversing, a hideous squeak. Really annoying, and you notice it more because electric vehicles like this are so quiet. So I think the handbrake is binding up. I think the shoes aren't retracting properly like they should, and I suspect that's probably because they need some corrosion cleaning off them and some lubrication. But we'll find out if that's the case as the video goes on. So it does that squeak when you reverse. Sometimes you can actually feel the car become more difficult to reverse and one of the brakes actually binds up. When you're driving, it's absolutely fine, and interestingly, when you're on a hill and you just put it in neutral and let it roll either forwards or backwards, it rolls quite freely. So I'm pretty sure it's a handbrake problem that resolves with use rather than a problem with the rear brake pads or the caliper sticking or binding. But what we're going to do, as we've got the wheels off and as we've got to take the brake caliper off to get to the brake shoes, then we'll do a rear brake service at the same time. So this video is going to be a rear brake and handbrake, except it's not handbrake because you put it on with a foot pedal. Parking brake, should we call it? Service video. So let's get started. So I'll just show you the jacking point for the back very quickly. It's underneath the suspension beam that goes across the car. Obviously try and make sure you get your jack in the middle. I've got a little rubber puck to stop the jack damaging the bar. So we're going to jack the back of the car, put some axle stands in, and then we can get started. Wheel nuts are 21mm. So in case you don't know, the handbrake, parking brake shoes are behind here, so there are a drum brake inside here. So we need to take the caliper off. I take the caliper bracket off as well. Now if there's not too much of a lip on the disc, you can usually just whip these two bolts off. They're 17s, the caliper mounting bracket bolts, and then slide the whole thing off and then take the pads out afterwards. So we'll try that. We might have to take the bottom caliper slider bolt off as well. So these are 17s, can't remember if I said that already. Actually, I think that's going to be just fine there. We'll come on to the caliper in a minute, but for now just check. Don't know whether you can hear that on camera, it's just catching slightly, not too much, but let's see what we find. I'm just taken this opportunity to check the wheel bearings as well, and they feel absolutely fine. So I hope you've got your ear defenders on. So at least the discs are in good condition, which is important. You probably know on electric vehicles, because of the regenerative braking, often the brakes don't actually do much work, and so it's very easy for the pads to get stuck in the caliper bracket and then not rub against the full face of the disc properly. Then the disc gets rusty and then you need new discs. So it's good to see that hasn't happened on this one. So I think this type of thing is a problem. I don't know if you can see that little spot of rust there on the back plate. I suspect that that's stopping the shoes moving. They should move more freely than that. I can tell already they're really catching against that backing plate. So my hope is that by taking them apart, cleaning all of this rust off and then lubricating, we're going to be able to solve the problem. So let's get started with dismantling the brake shoes. I recommend, if you've not done this before, or even if you have actually, always a good idea to take a picture of how they go. I've done this job not so long ago, so I can kind of remember. So remember the way round that this plate goes, because that's going to fall out. Remember the fact that the end of this spring is poking through the plate like that, and the orientation of these springs. We'll come to the bottom ones in a minute. So the order I do this in is to take these springs off here first. And for that I'm using a tool with quite a fine point, so it can get in under the spring and hook it off. So the next bit are these clips. So if you've not encountered these before, this is a pin in the middle that goes through to the back, and then this is a spring clip that holds the pin in place. So we need to either twist the spring or the pin while we're compressing the spring. You can get proper tools designed specifically for this job. I don't have that particular tool, so the way I've tended to do it is to use pliers to twist like that. The spring comes off. These springs are the same both sides. The pin stays in place, but just be aware that it might fall out. Okay. So that arm is connected to the handbrake cable, and that goes in that hole there. You can see quite substantial amounts of rust here. Handbrake cable itself comes in here and then it goes down underneath, and there's a spring links onto this arm. So I might just lightly lubricate the passage of the handbrake cable there, just in case it's that's not backing off properly and causing the problem. So now it's a case of cleaning every contact point of the brake shoes. So here, 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 all the way around, there's various points. Doing the same thing on the brake shoes, cleaning the disc with some brake cleaner as well, and then putting it all back together. I don't know how well you can see it. Let me see if you can see it at all. That braking surface for the handbrake shoe has got a little score mark on it. It's got a little line in the middle where it doesn't look like it's been wearing evenly. And actually the shoes seem to have a corresponding line as well. So I don't know whether a piece of debris has got stuck in there, and has been making this problem worse. But we'll give them a clean. So I'm using obviously some brake cleaner. I've tapped most of the dust out of these outside already. One thing I didn't do, which I should have done, is made a match mark between the disc and the wheel bearing and the hub flange, just so that I can get it back in the right position. Unfortunately, it's too late for that now, but yeah, don't follow my bad example. Make a match mark so that you can put the disc back in exactly the right orientation. So you can probably tell all of these points are where so those two, those and those are where these shoes rub against the backing plate, and they all need to be clean. Not spotlessly clean, but clean from rust, so that when you put the lubricant on, when I put the lubricant on in a minute, we've got a nice clean surface for it to go on. That one here that I'm doing again is particularly rusty. You can take this part off if you want. This is the adjuster, and we'll come to that later. So now we turn our attention to the backing plate. These ones at the top, I'm actually using a nylon brush because I don't see so much corrosion in here, so I don't really want to just take extra finish off to become another seat for corrosion when don't need to. These surfaces, on the other hand, do need a good old clean. And there's two down at the bottom here which I'm not going to be able to get the camera low enough to show you. So what you just saw me do there was unhook the handbrake cable spring from the spring stop. It's just down there, and that means that I can move this cable away and I can just clean it. More importantly, I can clean the surface that it runs on. You can see the chafing mark there where the paint's been taken off. I can just give it a tiny bit of lubricant and then put everything back together. So the last bit to clean to do with the handbrake, and I've still got some brake cleaner on here, is this pin just here. We'll put some fresh lubricant on there. The lubricant that I'm going to use is the same stuff that I use for the caliper sliding points, stuff like that. Plastilube by ATE, big brake manufacturer. We could have a long debate about brake lubricant, couldn't we? So, I used to be a copper slip kind of guy, or copper grease. I've kicked my copper grease habit now for brakes because I think stuff like this is far better So this is the stuff to use for sliding points. It is not the stuff to use on these. So those get silicone grease, and we'll see that in a little while. So the great thing about this is it comes out of a tiny little hole like that, which stops you using too much. So I'm just going to put some on that surface. Then I'm going to re-engage the handbrake cable here. So next, I'm going to put some on each of these contact points. And also on here. Now each part of the shoes also gets a corresponding dab of this stuff. And the last bit I haven't shown you the cleaning of is this. Okay, so we're all lubed up, ready to go. There are various orders you can do this in. This piece, you see it's wider on that side than that side. It holds that arm that you just saw me put on in place. So I like to get that on fairly soon. Just make sure that the adjuster and at the bottom hasn't slipped off the sides of the shoes. And that's just a case of giving the shoes a final clean, just in case you've knocked any grease onto them. What I should have done as well give this hub mating surface a good old clean, just to get the surface rust off, so that the disc sits cleanly back on there when we put it back on. Okay, what we need to do now is to hold the disc securely in place while we adjust the handbrake. To do that, you can use washers, or you can use some oversized nuts like this that are much bigger than the stud. Just on a couple, just to hold it in place. Hopefully it spins freely like that. And then what we need to do is take this rubber plug out of here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click the handbrake, parking brake. Can't stop myself calling it handbrake. I'm going to click it on and off a few times to just set everything, and then we'll talk through how to adjust the brake. Don't touch the foot brake because your caliper isn't in position. So you can hear the ever so slightest bit of catching now that I've put the brake on and off a few times, but it's still spinning freely. Okay, so time to adjust the parking brake. Do this at the end when you've done the cleaning procedure on both sides. You basically need the rubber bung out of this hole, you need a small screwdriver, and you need to line this up with where that adjuster is at the bottom. I'm not going to be able to show you this in detail because it's inside, we're basically looking inside this hole here. So there's the adjuster, and it's got teeth on it, and those teeth lock into the spring that's behind it, so essentially it clicks. So if we push the adjuster up like that with the screwdriver, we are expanding the shoes, so eventually we're going to lock the brake using the parking brake, lock the wheel using the parking brake. So we're going to expand the adjuster until it locks this disc, and then we're going to back it off by 7 clicks. For those of you particularly familiar with this process, I know that I'm not doing the full by-the-book Nissan workshop manual method, which has another step to it as well, but I've generally found that this part of it is enough for what's required to get things working properly. Okay, so I can see that adjuster just there. That's now locked, so now I'm going to back it off by 7 clicks. So now I'm pushing it downwards. And what we're aiming for at the end when we've done all of this is that the parking brake comes on and is effective within 6 to 7 ratchet clicks of the pedal. so I'll check that bit at the end just to make sure it's within the range. Put the rubber bung back in. We'll leave those in for now because they'll probably help keep the disc, well there's no probably about it, they will help keep the disc still when we're putting the caliper back on. So let's turn our attention to the brakes now, the normal brakes. Slide the pads out. I did a brake service on this a little while ago, but I figure while I'm here I may as well do another. They don't usually press out that easily, so that tells me that my brake service did something at least. Then the next stage is to see if this slider is sliding freely, and it is. So these boots, just pull them back gently from the pins like that. And then pull that out. Try and keep these clean, so I'm not going to do any of my cleaning work next to these. I'll just inspect them for any particles of grit or anything before I put them back, because getting grit inside these holes and then all that follows that is a right faff. So let's move elsewhere to do this bit. Okay, let's do the pads first. You can tell which pad is which either by the wear mark where the piston has been on the back of the inner one, or the fact that the wear indicator sensor, whatever, is on the inner one as well. So these pads have two backing plates on them. Take them both off. What we're making sure with these is that they're a completely flat surface, so although that doesn't look particularly pretty, it's completely smooth when I run my fingers across it. And that's important so that we have even pressure exerted from the piston through the pad onto the disc. Now, not quite so the case with this. You can see the paint's come off in places, so I'll try and clean that up. Which will involve taking the loose stuff off, which isn't ideal. I suppose best practice would be to have a new fitting kit, but I don't have one of those. So now it's a case of applying a thin layer of lubricant to the back of these. It's going to be under the entire surface of the shims, the backing plates. So I'm going to do the same with the other side, and I will turn the camera back on again when I've done. Now we move our attention to the pad carrier. Notice I have put some bits of tape over these rubber pieces here because we really don't want to get any grit in there because that will stop the caliper sliding backwards and forwards freely, and that will encourage premature brake wear. So the next thing to do is to take the hardware off the pad carrier. Give these a good old clean. The reason we're doing this is because you can get rust building up in here, and it pushes these outwards away from the pad carrier, and so compresses the pads, makes it harder for them to slide forwards and backwards. Then clean both sides of this. Okay, so having cleaned both sides of the hardware, it doesn't have to be spotless, but it does have to be free of grit and rust and debris. I'm just going to put a little bit of Plastilube inside that channel there. And that one as well. And then lubricate this surface, because this is the surface that the pads are going to run against. And I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant on the pad ears themselves as well. So I'm going to do the other side now, and then we'll start reassembling it. The last thing is to just clean these surfaces of the caliper where the pads are going to rub against, or be compressed by the caliper, I suppose I should say more correctly. And then, as with everywhere else, apply a small amount of lubricant. Right, now we can start to put things back together. If you've managed to keep these clean and they were sliding well beforehand, I don't think there's any reason to go meddling with them, to be honest. These are absolutely fine. So I've got a little bit of lubricant just on the sliding surfaces at the edges of the pads. I just transferred a tiny bit of lubricant onto the corner of the friction material there, so obviously that needs to come off. Just have one of the pad carrier bolts ready. These are torqued to 84 Newton meters. And And there we go. That is how to service the rear brakes and parking brake on your Nissan Leaf. Okay, so here we are back at the same view we started with, just torquing the wheel nuts up now. I've done exactly the same on the other side that I showed you on this side. Just thought I'd show you this bit, I don't know, to confirm that I do actually use a torque wrench for these things. So the torque is 113 Newton meters. Okay, there we go. We're all done. It's all back together. I've taken it for a test drive. Drives really well. Tested the handbrake quite thoroughly. I can tell, although I wish I had the noise and now the absence of noise to convince you or to confirm to you, but I don't, because the car wouldn't play ball today. I don't know why. Clearly cars don't have a personality, except when they behave like this you wonder if they might. I can tell by the way the handbrake feels and by the way the car rolls when you have it in neutral and you let the handbrake off that we've resolved the problem. The problem then, to confirm, just to sum up, was that it was making a hideous squeak when reversing after you take the handbrake off, particularly first thing in the morning, but it was doing it pretty much every time for, as I say, longer than I'm prepared to admit. Finally got around to fixing it, and when I wanted to record the noise for this video, it wouldn't play ball. Hey ho, that's the way it goes sometimes. It's fixed now, and now you know how to do a rear brake service and a parking brake service on a Nissan Leaf. Hope it was helpful. As I said at the start of the video, if you like this kind of thing, please consider subscribing. Until next time, thanks very much for watching. Bye.